All right, we've all been there, right? You hatch this absolutely brilliant new idea, the adrenaline starts pumping, and the possibilities just seem utterly endless. Starting a new project or venture is so exhilarating. But, well, as we all know a little too well, maintaining that initial spark all the way to the finish line is an entirely different story. So in this explainer, we're going to unpack the science and the psychology behind why we start with such incredible enthusiasm and exactly what we need to do to finally cross that finish line.
So, why is it that starting is just so effortless, but finishing feels literally impossible? If you're feeling a little twinge of guilt right now, hey, you are not alone. I mean, most of us have a very real graveyard of abandoned, unfinished projects. You know the ones. Half-read books, that expensive acoustic guitar just gathering dust in the corner, or that collection of domain names you bought at 2 a.m. for businesses you never even launched. We have this remarkably strong desire to start, but we hit a massive wall when it comes to the follow-through.
Okay, let's dive into this. The culprit here is what experts call creative inertia, the psychological roadblock that prevents us from actually following through on new ventures. I want you to really absorb this. Your failure to finish, it's not some deep personal flaw, it's really not. Our brains actually start working against us once the novelty of a new idea wears off. See, when you start, your brain is just flooded with dopamine, the reward chemical. But once that initial rush fades, the work becomes, well, work. Recognizing that this dopamine drop-off triggers a very defined psychological state is the absolute first step to dismantling it.
So let's get into why we actually quit, and look at what we can call the 3 villains of progress.
When you break it down, our roadblocks pretty much always fall into 3 distinct categories. Think of it like a pie of procrastination. Fear of the unknown, a lack of motivation, and overwhelm. Every single time you've abandoned a project, it was likely because one of these 3 villains completely took the steering wheel. Let's break down exactly how each of these operates, starting with the whole fear factor.
Now, what's really interesting here is our deeply ingrained tendency to just stick to the comfort zone, even when it's completely unfulfilling. Why do we do that? Because starting and actually committing to finish something new involves massive uncertainty. It brings up a really profound fear of failure, or honestly, sometimes even a fear of success. Evolutionarily speaking, our brains prefer the predictable, albeit unfulfilling safety of the known over the scary, uncertain nature of putting our finished, vulnerable work out into the real world.
But hey, if it's not fear stopping you, it's probably a lack of motivation. And this is kind of like a two-headed monster made of procrastination and a lack of discipline. Putting off tasks doesn't just delay a project, it actively creates this vicious cycle of delay and inaction that gets harder and harder to break. And remember that initial dopamine burst we just talked about? Motivation naturally wanes because our brains stop rewarding us for the idea and suddenly demand the execution. When that happens, it takes sheer discipline to consistently work towards a goal. Without that discipline, the project just stalls out completely.
And that brings us to the 3rd villain, the overwhelm trap. You know, this one is super sneaky because it often disguises itself as ambition or just having high standards. We try to pursue way too many goals at once, which completely scatters our focus. And then we mix in perfectionism. This intense desire to do everything absolutely flawlessly ends up entirely paralyzing us. The inevitable result isn't a masterpiece, it's total burnout. Trying to do too much violently hinders your progress and leads straight to exhaustion.
All right, enough about the problem. Let's flip the script and look at some actual strategies to finally finish. Time for the finisher's playbook.
So the absolutely crucial point here is that to go from being just a starter to a true finisher, we have to build a rock-solid foundation. You must divide those larger goals into smaller, ultra-manageable steps to neutralize the overwhelm. A really incredible tactic for this is the 15-minute rule. If writing a whole book is paralyzing, just commit to writing for 15 minutes a day or even just hitting a tiny 200-word daily count. By setting realistic goals like this, you completely bypass that crushing feeling of having too much to do. Establishing this kind of consistent, micro-routine is exactly how you maintain momentum and trick the brain's natural resistance to hard work.
Building on that, you have to recognize that honestly, we can't always do this alone. You really need to find accountability partners. By simply sharing your goals with other people, you are fundamentally changing the stakes. Think about it. When you keep a project a secret, it's incredibly easy to quit, right? Because no one will ever know. There's zero social cost to giving up. But bringing others into the process creates external pressure and a support system. It helps you stay motivated and keeps you on track when your own internal discipline inevitably dips.
And this brilliantly illustrates the next point. As you push toward that finish line, you are going to stumble. That's just a guarantee for sure. But you must consciously view setbacks not as a flashing red light telling you to quit, but as an absolute necessity. Shifting your mindset to see failure as just raw data rather than some personal defeat completely robs the fear of the unknown villain of all its power over you. Every single mistake just gives you better coordinates for your next attempt.
Plus, you really can't wait until the absolute very end to feel good about your work. You've got to celebrate milestones. Remember a minute ago when we talked about breaking larger goals down into daily word counts or those 15-minute chunks? Well, every time you achieve one of those smaller goals, you need to reward yourself. Acknowledging those small wins provides vital positive reinforcement. It literally gives your brain the dopamine fuel it desperately needs to keep grinding through the unglamorous parts of the work.
Let's move on and see how this all builds together into actually crossing that finish line and officially becoming a finisher.
The ultimate key to pushing through the messy middle of literally any project is actively maintaining a positive mindset. And the best way to do that is to intensely focus on the benefits of achieving your goals. When you're stuck in the weeds, when you're exhausted, and when perfectionism is whispering in your ear to just throw in the towel, you have to mentally teleport yourself to the finish line. Visualize the reward, the satisfaction, and the growth that's waiting for you. By holding tight to those end benefits, you can sustain your momentum and finally close the loop. So what does this all mean for us? We've unpacked the psychology holding us back, and we've got the exact playbook to break through. You have the tools to defeat fear, motivation drops, and overwhelm. So I want to leave you with one vital question. What project are you going to finally finish today? Don't let this just be another explainer you consume and forget about. Take these strategies, pick just one abandoned project from your graveyard, and change your identity from a starter to a finisher. You've absolutely got this.